We'll continue on our topic for reports. Now we have looked into the different tabs that a report has. Today we'll go in and actually create a report. Right? Let's just walk through the slide deck to see if we missed something. Oh, we didn't talk about this, so let's do that first. So each data source that we have talked about, all active and terminated workers, business process transactions, they have many CRFs. These are called as class report fields. They can be simple or complex types, right? These are the CRF types like text, numeric, date, time zone, single instance. Now, these all are Workday delivered types, right? And then there's something called as calculated fields. And there are multiple types in those as well. And those all are custom. Excuse me. Right? But like we have data sources, we also have business objects, and business objects are nothing but the different tables in the system. And each table has some or the other fields, which makes that particular business object. So these fields has types, and those types are defined here. Right? To look into more detail, let's navigate to some of the objects here. Let's say benefit event. Okay, let's pick up this example. Which I'm just gonna filter it on the Workday delivered one. Right. So if you see something here, every field name has a field type here. Maximize this, zoom it a little bit. And you don't have to, like, as you grow working in this domain, as you get more exposure and more experience, you won't even have to look into the type here. Just by looking at the logo, the symbol that you see here, you will know that you will be able to identify that which particular type it is. Like this one goes for a single instance. Like whenever you use this field anywhere, it will give you one output, like one row item. This is a date field. Every time you use this, it will output a date. This is a self-referencing. It is similar to a single instance. It may or may not return one. It may return more than one as well. Then you have true false. If you see here, if I zoom it more, this is TF, TF, which means true false. It is of type Boolean. So it will either be a yes or a no. And then you have a multi-instance, right? If you use this field, this might return multiple rows of output. So you would see something like a worker name, and in the next column, you might see multiple rows. That means that we are using a multi-instance. This is a number, numeric. So this will actually return you an actual number. It can be any number, whole number, a decimal. It could be anything. And then we already done multi-referencing. I think these are the types. A text is what we need. I think we didn't look into a text field. Right here. So anytime you see a T, that means it's a text field. It returns information in form of text. So these are the most commonly seen fields that you will be using in your reports as well. Now, why is this important? Why are we doing this? It's because if you recall creating, zoom out everything from here. So if you recall creating condition logics, whether it's for a compensation eligibility or for a business process or for a notification, we all are familiar by now with the way how we create those logics. It's like A is equal to B, right? So for example, if I open up compensation rate profile, Oh, I'm not boxing in as Logan, so let me box in as Logan. So if you look into any condition logic, let's look at compensation eligibility rule. Any flex card. So let's say if I try to look into this particular logic, okay, we have this eligibility rule. Right? It is picking up a source field or a condition rule. There's a relational operator, there's a comparison type, and then there's a comparison value. Now, what you use here, the type of field you use here, defines what relational operator you will get and the type of value that you have to enter. Right? In this case, this is a rule. Whenever you use a condition rule instead of a field, you always get very limited options like equal to, etc. But if I open this, now I'm using an actual field which is of type multi-instance. Just by the logo I can see, and also here I can see this is of type multi-instance, right? Now let's say if I go in the edit mode of this, now since this is a multi-instance, that's why I'm getting these all operations, relational operators, right? All these values, any in the selection list, none in the selection list. Now, instead of this, if I use something of a single instance, like country location, just for the testing purpose, okay, we don't have that. I need a single instance field. Okay, let's say I'm just using a random field, but this is of type single instance. Okay, now just observe the change in the relational operator. Most of the options will be the same, except for this one. It's not any in the selection list. Now it's in the selection list, right? And in that case, I only get to add in one value here. I can select multiple, but it will only pick up one at a time, right? Now, instead of this, if I would have used like a date value, right? Let's say this one, and change this. You see my values changed. Whether my date is blank, is not blank, equal to, greater than, equal to, let's say I pull in this option, I automatically get this. So why knowing these class report fields is important, because the type of field that you use, other options gets changed accordingly, right? So whenever you're creating a report or anything which requires to use fields, whether it's an eligibility logic, whether it's a standard condition rule in a business process or in a notification, always see what you're trying to filter on or what logic you want to create. Based on that, pick up the right field, right? Moving on. Oh, we did not see a currency. A currency symbol looks like a dollar sign. Right? Copy a standard report. You don't need to do that. We already talked about sharing. Transferring ownership, I'll show you that. Not that important. And yes, we'll definitely schedule some reports. Alerts not to be done. Okay. Now let's jump into the, we're already into the tenant, and let's create a report for ourselves. Now the use case we'll use is simple. We won't complicate it much, because you will have to replicate that for yourself and play around as much as possible. Right. So the use case that we have is we have to create a report for all the new hires that happened in a particular date range. All right. So let's say that date range is the last 6 months or the first 6 months of this year. So we'll start by running the task, create custom report. Right. It's very important to follow the naming convention. If your organization does not have one, please make sure you use one. And make it a habit of following or creating naming conventions, which could be used tenant-wide, so that you become an example of, putting good practices in the team. The CR would be a custom report. And then the next would be, after the custom report, it would be the name. Let's say we use flex name file. It's test one. Right. Also, the name of the report makes a lot of difference. You might see a lot of new hire reports, but how do you make it unique to your requirement? You give it some kind of unique word to it, any kind of uniqueness to it. Right. You pick up the type as advanced. We won't undo any of these. Now we want to use a data source which is not indexed. So we'll go with all active and terminated workers. Now, please be mindful that we won't be going into complex reporting examples, because doing it here is not going to help you. The exposure you get at job or on job doing this is what makes you a reporting expert. Some people learn it in few months, some people takes years. The only reason, it's not in the learning capability of anyone. The only reason is the exposure. It's also very much dependent on how a company operates, what kind of data points they focus on. So it's nothing like 1 hour session or 5 hour sessions is not enough to learn reporting. I get that. But we'll use these hours to at least understand how to create a report. How does it run? Excuse me. We'll make ourselves comfortable with the filters, the prompting, the sharing of the reports. That makes at least 30 to 40% of what reports are. Because a lot of these requests, you won't get requests to create report on a daily basis. It's highly unlikely. In most cases, you will get that you need to add in a column, or you need to tweak a report to make it applicable to another use case, or you need to share this report, or you need to schedule this report. Right? So that 30 to 40% of what you do here is going to sum up to 90% of the requests that you will get. The rest 10%, rest 10, 20% is what you will get to create new reports. And that is the exposure. That's why some people take years in learning reports, just because of the exposure, right? Usually in an implementation company where you are deployed on a particular project for an organization and you are implementing Workday, then yes, reporting is something that you get to do on a day-to-day basis if you are a reporting consultant, right? But if you're an HCM consultant, report is something which is like, it's seasonal. It's something which is seasonal, right? But don't worry, continue the practice, continue the consistency, and you will get there. Yes, Methi, go ahead.
Rohan, you said we are not going to use indexed fields here. Could you please explain me what's the difference between indexed and non-indexed fields for the data source?
Sure. I said indexed data source. So there are two types of data source. Like one you see here is standard, and the other type is indexed. Now we use indexed data source where we are concerned about the performance of a report.
Okay.
Those are, again, data sources are Workday delivered. We don't create them. Right? So you might have a particular data source in indexed and in a standard type as well, which I recently realized. I only thought that if there's a data source standard, there's no index type, but that's not true. So if a data source can be, one data source can be indexed and standard as well. Now we use index where, like I said, we are concerned about the performance, right? And but the only, or like I'll say the primary concern in using an index data source is the limit. It has many limitations when you're trying to pull fields from different business objects. That's why we don't use those. Within a standard data source, we have many relational business objects. Like with worker, you will see like 50, 100 different related business objects. But in case of index, that does not happen. So you will be limited by the fields that you can add here.
Okay.
But yes,
Yeah.
index data source is not that something which companies don't use. They use, but if I talk about the ratio of these reports, is like 50:1. Like you will create 50 reports with standard data source and maybe one with an index data source, which would be
Okay.
like a specific requirement, something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
I got it. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So once we develop a report from beginning, this is how it looks like. And it's the same for any other report, whether you develop it from the beginning or you edit an existing advanced report. Right? Since worker business object is the primary here for this data source, you get this line automatically. Right? And let's start by building. Can everyone help me giving some of the common worker data points that I'd like to see? I'll start with employee ID. What else would you like to see in the report? And
First name.
yes, always, sorry to interrupt, always whenever pulling these reports, always check the related actions. You need to make sure that they are coming from the business object, which is your primary business object, right?
Okay.
And also read the description. In this case, it says the employee ID or contingent worker ID for the worker, right? So if either contingent worker or an employee, it will give you the ID that you need. All right, go ahead. What other things that would you like to see?
Last name.
Last name, first name. Let's do that. Legal first name. And there are two types of names. There are multiple types, but two of the ones that are primary, one is legal name and other is preferred name. Legal name is what you have on your documents. Preferred is what you would like to be called. So there's something, every employee gets an option what their legal name and preferred name should be, right? Again, we'll check. Okay, now this is a good learning here. Though it says legal first name, and it is a Workday delivered field. And again, a suggestion, always when trying to learn reporting, always pick up the Workday delivered field. Okay, it says it is coming from a business object, which is called as external or internal candidates. Now, using this may or may not give me the right results. But if there is a relation between this object and the worker object, it will give me the right results. Right? So, but we don't have to go that way. And why to complicate things? We'll first search that if there is a field which exists within our primary business object, and we have one. In case this did not existed, then we would use this and test it out, whether it's giving us the right results. So I'll use this. It says the worker's legal first or the given name, right? So I'll use that. And then, like someone said, the last name. So we will go with that. Legal last name. Legal last name. Let's test it out. Nope, not this one. Yes, this one. Now, if I look at this does not look to be a Workday delivered field. It is a calculated field. Right. So whoever created this did not follow a naming convention. They did add GACF, but not a good way to name it. We'll discuss that as well. Any other information you'd like to see?
Hire date.
That's a good one. Because our use case is built on hire date, so we need hire date. Now, hire date also comes in different shapes and forms, right? If the person is a new hire, then yes, there only will be one hire date. But what if the person is a rehire? They have an original hire date as well. Right? So there's another field which is called as original hire date, which is not used very commonly. If you need to, let's see, this is based on worker. This is the date when the employee was first hired. All right. Now let's use that, and we'll also use the hire date. You have multiple things, always take the related actions. Now, why I'm asking you guys, I know it's very time consuming, it's very administrative that you go in and look at the related actions for every field. Why do you have to do this? Because we all are new to reporting, right? With the experience that I have, I can go in directly and tell you which field you want to pick based on what use case I have, because I did this. Because I did this, I know which fields I have to go in and pick. So this is not something that I can teach you. I can teach you the ways how to get there, but a lot of it comes from the exposure and the experience. Right? And this is not something that you get in a month or two. It does take time, and that's okay. Be comfortable with that. But being comfortable does not mean that you stop progressing. You have to continue to progress in this. Okay. So like anyone could go in and pick up this one, right? This again, it's a calculated field. Someone did not name it correctly. I can pick up this one as well if I'm new to this. This is again a calculated field, but it's of type true, false. It's a difference. This is of type text. This is of type date. So my best case scenario is to, that's why I said always use the work they delivered and which is coming from the table from the primary business object, and read the description. The worker's most recent hire date. All right. Yes, Mehdi, go ahead.
Rohan, I see authorized usage in that
Mhm.
business or details. So what is that, Rohan?
This does not, um, it's not concerned on reporting. This is where you can use these field. Default area, it contains most of the areas of Workday, and you can also use this field in a benefits eligibility. Now, a
Okay,
good
this
example
is
of
not restricting anything related to
no,
reports.
nothing restricted. Why is this coming up like this? I'll show you a good example from that. Every field has an authorized usage, right? I'll show you, and you must have seen it. And I think I did talk about it as well. Like we were just looking at a compensation eligibility rule. All right. So if you see here, this is a compensation specific field. If you look at the authorized usage for it, it says compensation eligibility and calculation engine.
Right.
So outside this, I cannot use this field in my report. I cannot, even if I, let's say, copy paste it, even though this is something I can pull on a worker table directly. But if I put it here with the compensation, nothing. If I remove the compensation, I might get something. You see, I have this, but this is this field, or this is a calculated field, location primary. You see, this is a workday delivered and the authorized user is default area. So I can use this field anywhere. But when it comes to compensation, I can only use this field. I cannot use this one as well. And there are few fields which are only for benefits. There are few fields which are only for time off and absence. Not every module, not every workday functional area has it, but some of them has. Okay. So I've been on the worst side of these authorized users. I was working on the absence projects. This was sometime back in 2020 and early 2021, where I was not able to get a calculation logic work. And that was because I was using the field with the wrong authorized usage. I never realized that this has such importance, but then I realized, okay, yes, it is. Right. But for reporting, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have added the original hire date. We have added the hire date. Before I add any other things, please make note of these things, which I have been saying. First, Always check the related actions. These are like reporting tips 101, which I'm sharing. Please make a note. I don't want any one of you to miss it. The first, adding any field is equal to checking the related actions. Like the related actions, and what do you check in the related actions? That it is coming from the primary business object. That would be 1.1. 1.2 would be always read the description. If that makes sense, it's helpful. If it does not make sense, don't spend too much time on it. Third, try 1.3. Try to use work that delivered fields when in the learning stage. And every day we are in the learning stage. And that same applies to me as well. Right. So few of these tips. Then the next one, which I just mentioned, what was that? I lost it. I'll come to that later if I recall it. Okay, what other information would you like to see? Let's say we put in a job profile for the worker. Okay. Again, check the related actions. Put a habit of it. I still do that. Trust me, I still do it till this date. So this is a report field. This is from worker. This is a worker job profile. It's work to deliver. All right. All right. I'd also like to see the compensation. So I'll say compensation grade. This is built on worker, the worker employees compensation grade, and it's work to deliver. So I'll use this. Yes, Meena, go ahead.
Rohan, I wanted to check. So whenever you click on any field, or if you go on those 3 related actions and check that field, what is the meaning of one dot? What is the meaning of one dot extracted? The symbol.
This one?
Yes.
This is the single instance, which we, I think, discussed in a few minutes before. From the class report fields, there's something called as type single instance.
Yes.
This is what that symbol is.
So it's more than one is multi, right?
More than one is multi.
Multi, right?
Okay.
Yes. I can pick up one multi-instance as well, and I'll show you how the difference is. Let's say I pick up benefit related.
Will emergency contact come here?
We can pull that information, obviously. Let's try that. Emergency contact. You have emergency contacts. Let's see, this is built on worker. It contains the emergency contact. And then the difference you would see, this is a multi-instance. Okay. If I want to just, I'll show you the difference. Right. I'm pulling emergency contact, which is a multi-instance from worker. Now, let's say I want to pull a specific information from that emergency contact of that worker. So what I'll do is I'll instead use this field as an object. And let's say I pick up the first name. Right? Just for an example. Right? Now let's run this report. I've not added anything else. This is this blank report. I'll do I'm sorry, go ahead.
So here the business object is changed to the field, right?
The field is working as a business object now.
Yeah, yes.
The other way around. Right? And if you see something, these are text, this is a date, this is a single instance, these two are multi-instance. Right? And then I'm pulling this information from the emergency contact. Whenever doing the test, I'm sorry, go ahead.
From the emergency contact, the first name will be pulled out when we run the report, right?
That's what the goal is, but we are not sure if this will work. It's a test that we're trying to do. Okay? Everything in reports is trial and error. Okay. Meera, you have a question?
Sorry, it was previous. I do have, but once we run the report or edit the report, I wanted to know. Yeah, okay, it's okay. I'll reping.
Okay, all right. So run the test one, it will only give you 10 records, right? And let's see what we have. We have the ID, name, legal name, original hire date. Hire date, in most cases, it will be the same. But if it's a rehire, this might change. Then you have the profile, you have the grade. Nothing came in the elections, nothing came in the emergency, but because they don't have it, right? So this is not a good test. Now what we'll do is we'll run this report again, or maybe like edit it first, because we don't want it to run it for everyone. So this was just plain report, like all the fields are there as different columns, but for most of it, we could not see the data because the employee records does not have that. So let's pick up a date range. To see that data, let's pick up a particular date range, and then we'll run the complete report. So let's move on to these tabs one at a time. Let's go in the sorting.
So, Rohan, while we are here, I wanted to check that. Can you please scroll down? Group column headings. What do you mean by that?
Group column headings.
In the column tab.
This one.
If you scroll down, yes.
So if you're using, see, it's asking for a business object value, right? So if you're using anything else other than the primary business object, you need to list it here. Like I was using emergency contact in my business object field, right? I used it here. So this becomes my related business object in this case, and I have to list it here. If I use any other one like
compensation things.
Yeah, like any compensation.
Okay.
Like any kind of compensation value, I'll have to, and Workday automatically tells you like which one of it you're using. But as long as you're not running this report as a web service, you don't need to add them here.
Okay.
Right? I'll give you an example. So let's say I'll come to that in a minute. Okay. We'll cover all these tabs today. It might be an extended session as well. So stay tight. Right. So any other question, Meera? Okay. Now, if I talk about the sorting, it's pretty simple. You just pick up a field based on which you want to do the sorting, whether it's on a benefit elections. I think we'll pick it up based on an, let's say, hire date. You have these options, ascending or descending. Let's pick up the descending so that we get the most recent hire dates. Then in the filter section, this is where we basically, like, columns just give you what you want to see about what you see in the report. Filter is the main logic of a report. Because of these filter, the what you see in the report output comes up. So in this case, our hire date, like we said, would be like a range starting for the first 6 months, right? So what we'll do is we'll pick up the hire date field. Excuse me. Now, since this is a date field, my operator value would be accordingly. I want it greater than or equal to, and it's giving me a date value. Right? So I'll put in the value as 01/01/22. It automatically picks up the year. This would be the starting range. And then I'll give it another one. Hire date. This would be less than and equal to. That would be the first 6 months, which would be 06/01/22. Right. Now, let's leave others for now and let's try to run this report. Right. So this a report will now output all the new hires between the date range of January 1st to, what was the other one? To June 1st. I should have done it June 30th, but that's okay. Now let's run the report. Okay, now we see some more information. You have compensation grade for a few of these. We still don't have any benefit elections. Let's scroll down. You have about 400 people in the list. Let's see if we got, oh, okay. Let's see if we have benefit elections for any of these. None of them, that's crazy. Let's just download this report and save everyone. You can see the Excel file, right?
Yes, Rohan.
Yes.
All right, so let's see if we can filter based on this. Oh, we don't have any. Nobody has the benefit elections, but we do have just remove the blanks. So at least we have few folks who have emergency contact information, right? Now, out of that, now out of this particular value, which we were using based on the worker object, if I go here in my report, so this particular field was on my worker, and this particular field is on this field, which is emergency contact. So if I go here, it's picking up the first name from these values, right? Now I see we don't have any benefit elections and people don't have multiple emergency contacts as well. So let's go to this employee. And this employee is, don't feel like changing it. Or maybe I'm just gonna add emergency contacts here. I'm just adding some values here so that we can see it in the report. I hope it, oh come on. We'll do that later since it's gonna take a lot of time. All right, now that we know it's pulling the information, we don't have any benefit election, so that's why it's not outputting anything. Now we understood the sorting, we understood the filter. Now the next thing is prompt. Now let's say I want this particular data set to be of a different date range. I want that whenever someone runs this report, it should give the data for the last 6 months. Whether I'm running it today, whether I'm running it tomorrow, whether I'm running it after a month. It should update my last 6-month date range dynamically. So there are two ways to do it. So either in the filter section itself, by changing the comparison type, which would be all, you can value from another field. Now, in that case, you can pick up the value like today minus 6 months, something like this. And in this case also, this would be value from another field, which would be today. So pick up the one with the system. Now, what this will do is, whenever I run this report now, it will automatically pick up the data. Let's go back here. It will automatically pick up the data 6 months from today. Right now, if I run it, it's giving me about 2,200 workers, which were hired in the last 6 months. Right, and it's giving those dates. And these are all in an order of descending. If I, let's say, want to filter it in an ascending order, what would be 6 months from today, which is November, so it would be sometime in May. No. Yeah, it would be sometime starting August. So that's what it's doing. It's August, then July. And for any information on emergency and everything, if it's there, it will come up. Right. But there's another way you can make it more dynamic. Yes, Mira, go ahead.
So it's automatically eliminating the rest of the records, right? This is what we have set up, is what you are trying to say.
I won't say it's eliminating. I would say it is only processing the new hires for the last 6 months. It's not eliminating anything.
Okay.
Previously, we given a date range of starting January 1st to June 1st.
Hmm.
Right? So that was like a hard coded.
Hmm.
Now, instead of that, what we're doing is we are making it more dynamic and saying that anyone who runs it today will get the data for starting 6 months from that day till today.
Okay.
Right. In the next use case, what we'll do is we'll give user the opportunity to pick up whether they want data for the last 6 months, last 3 months, last 5 days, last 5 years. It's up to them. So what we'll do is in that case, we'll use prompts. And once it comes
Okay.
in edit mode, custom report, edit. Right. So now what we'll do is we'll enable these filters to work as prompts. And how do we do that? Again, we go at the comparison value, comparison type, and we use the option prompt the user for the value. Right. In this case, since it's a date range value, usually we keep it as default prompt, but since this is a date range, we'll do the starting prompt. System is running really slow. Then we go here, we change it again back to prompt the user for the value. Then we do an ending prompt. Then we go to our prompt tab. Okay, now we don't have anything. We enable this and we get all the prompts that has been enabled. Over here also, you can specify, like determine default value at the runtime. You can do today minus 6 months, etc. But we'll just keep them as required. Now, if I run the report, as an end user, I'll be prompted to enter these values. And if I don't enter this, I'll get an error. I can obviously remove them as not required, but I'm doing it because we need for a particular date range. Now I can enter any date range, whether it's 01, 01, 2019 to 01, 01, 2020. I can pull data for any date range without any restrictions. There weren't any restrictions before, but without any limitations, I would say. So it's giving me a data for all the new hires that happened in this particular date period. So prompting is a very good way. It's a very efficient way to make reports more dynamic and make it available for a bigger audience. Right now, this is a very simple example. There are way more complex examples when it comes to reporting on transactions. You have to put in the value of what type of transaction this is. You have to put in the value of what kind of organization, location, region, management hierarchy. It goes a lot complex, but you need to know how to enable reports, how to enable prompts. You need to know how to change the filter. You need to know how to share the reports. The next thing is sharing. Right now, it's not shared with anyone, right? If I want to share it with any particular group, I can add it here, HR analyst, and save it. If I want to use it, give it to someone who is just an end user, but not part of any security group like Magic Mike. So I just, add their name. They can access the report, right? One last thing is advanced. Now, remember we did not, if I go to my columns tab, we did not add any group heading for this particular value. This gives us a problem if we enable this report as a web service. Once we enable a report as a web service in this particular option, if I try to save it, I'll get an error. And that error pertains to the group column heading must be specified. Right. So what we do is we go here. We define, because if you're using it a web service, that means we will be sending this report outside Workday. And that is something which requires us to list all the external business objects we're using, or I would say non-primary business objects. If I save it, there are still errors. XML aliases, okay. And these web services are nothing but XML format of reports. And the error we are getting is it's saying that both of these fields has the same XML values. So you need to change that. So what I'll do is solve the purpose for it. Oh, okay. I'll have to disable this report because the error that we are receiving. So once we enable a report as a web service, what happens is, let me remove this. That will solve it. It still won't. So when we enable a report as a web service, we get a lot of values as, let me just remove these prompts. So the reason we are getting the error is because once we enable the report as advanced, as a web service in the advanced tab, automatically all these values has an XML alias attached to it automatically. For that, I'll have to like remove these from here, and then if I remove it from here, you see column heading override XML aliases. So these are the values that the external system would be using. They won't be using these names. They'll be using these names, which are in the form of XML, right? So what that error is that we only had one hire date and we were using it in two prompts, initially ending prompt and start prompt. And both of them were getting the same value for it. And there was no way for us to change it. So that's why I have to remove it and just give you an example of how that is. And when I run it, I only get an ending prompt, which I can give as of today. So it will list all the hires. I really don't know what hires it will put. But just to let you know that enabling the web service also enables the XML format of that report. So that was about reporting. Any questions? This report will take time to learn. Open up. Any questions?
Rohan, when we are using this prompt, so prompt basically what exactly it's doing? Is it highlighting the specific fields which we want to be included in the report and to be sent to specific users?
It's up to you, Abhishek. Prompt, see, if you go by the literal meaning, prompt is like you prompt user for something, right? So that is exactly the concept here. Whatever the value you want the user to enter, you make it as a prompt. You enable it as a prompt. Now, it can be a date field, like we just saw. It can be a text field. It can be a true false field. It can be any type of field that you want it to be. Does that make sense?
Okay, so prompt means these are the fields we have included in the report which we want the user to see, the end user to see. When he downloads this report, these all the columns and the fields he'll be able to see. And do you mean to say that?
Download would be after this. See, uh, let's say you are from business, right? You have a requirement for a particular report, right? And you want the report uh, to be in a way that you want to see all the active employees, all the terminated employees, all the contractors in a report, but not all of them at the same time. All right, so that's a requirement. Now, let's say I've created a report and I've given you the functionality to choose that when you run a report, whether you want to see active workers, whether you want to see terminated workers, or you want to see contract workers, right? So what I've done is I've enabled a field as a prompt in which you can choose active, terminated, or contractor. So it will be, the court will be in your ball to pick up which type of worker you want to pick. Let's say you pick up active. So the report output will only have active workers, and then you will download. if it's needed to be done.
Oh, okay.
So
So we okay.
go
Got
by
it.
the literal meaning. Prompt. It's like you're prompting something. You're asking the user to enter this value, and based on this value, your report output will be generated.
Yeah. So it's basically like a filter parameter which we are giving
Exactly.
it to the user.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's not like there are prompts that are defined already. Yes, there are prompts as well. But in this case, like, and with different data sources, there are different built-in prompts as well. But for this data source, we don't have any built-in prompts. So what we did is we created our own prompts, or we used the existing values. Now I can use this legal name also as a prompt. I can use any of these fields as a prompt. It's up to me, or not up to me, but it's based on what the requirement is. Any other questions?
One last question, Rohan. Like, if we are building a report, and this report we have to share it to a third party system, like we have to send this to some other system like SAP or any
Mhm.
other ERP tool. So in that way, like, how we'll be sending it to that user? Is it will it be getting delivered on his mail from where he can download it and he can save it in his system, or upload it in his system, or we can directly how we'll be able to send that report, like if he has to use it?
There are multiple ways of doing that. You can do it through, like, we just enable this report as a web service.
Right.
So this is one way of sharing this report. Now in tomorrow's session, once we'll start with the topic of EIBs, we'll discuss this, that what's the purpose of enabling this as a web service. Okay. Another way is actual integrations. Now EIBs are also type of integrations, but if you use the XML integrations, that's another way you can use these reports to be shared. But the most common format is using the outbound EIBs, which we'll discuss tomorrow.
Okay. And one more question, Rohan. Sometimes we see that these clients will have some reports from their legacy system, okay, which they are regularly using it when they're using their previous system, and these reports they want to import it in the new system which they are implementing. So in that way, in Workday, do we have any import export functionality even for reports, or it's like we have to see those reports and based on that we have to do a manual creation here?
From a third party system, no, there is no way for that. You have to create it manually.
Okay.
Within different tenants, yes, you can transfer reports, like from sandbox to production, or from an implementation to another tenant.
Okay.
You can do that, but when that's, I think, one of, and I think Workday has a very strong reason for that, that they don't transfer, because the language of the third party system or the legacy system is not what Workday uses. It may or may not be on the same page, right? So I don't think Workday does that. Workday allows any report transfer capabilities from a legacy system to Workday.
And Rohan, like you have mentioned here, custom reports. So these custom reports, uh, they are different from the standard ones which is available in Workday, and we are building it based on client requirement here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here when we are building this custom reports, we have the fields available. We are just adding the fields, removing the fields, and building our own report. We are not going into too much of technicals like formatting of XML, those codes and all that. That we are not doing it right now.
And we also won't do it. That would be responsibility of an integration expert.
Okay.
But as an HCM person, we should know that XML is a format, is a language that Workday uses when it comes to integrations,
Okay.
right? An in-depth integration expert would be actually like maybe coding the XML for a report as well. But we won't do that.
Okay. So that's a reporting module in Workday, or
That would be
it's
integration.
integration. Okay.
Yes. And even to be an integration expert, you should know reports. So what we're doing here is like giving you the core strength to work on any upcoming projects. If you know reports, learning integration would be, I'll say 30% less painful. I should not say painful, that's discouraging, but 30% better learning, 30-40%, your integration learning would be easier. Let me put it in that way.